How's your body?
Good, Gurudev.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
all right. Chant nicely.
Yes, Gurudev.
Audiobook available on Google Drive. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 23, The Brahmana's Wives Blessed. This chapter describes how Lord Sri Krishna, after inducing the cowherd boys to beg for food, showed mercy to the wives of some brahmanas performing a sacrifice and made the brahmanas themselves feel remorse. When the cowherd boys became hungry, they asked Sri Krishna about obtaining food, and he sent them to beg from a group of brahmanas who were performing a sacrifice nearby. But these brahmanas ignored the boys, thinking Sri Krishna an ordinary human being. The boys returned disappointed, but the Lord sent them off again, advising them to ask the brahmanas' wives for the food. These ladies had heard of Krishna's transcendental qualities and were very much attached to him. As soon as they learned he was nearby, they went to him in great haste, bringing all 4 varieties of food. In this way, they offered themselves to Krishna. Krishna told the women that while one can develop transcendental love for him by seeing his deity form in the temple, meditating upon him, and chanting his glories, one cannot achieve this result simply by being in his physical presence. He advised them that since they were housewives, their particular duty was to help their husbands perform sacrifices. He therefore instructed them to return to their homes. When the ladies went back home, their Brahmana husbands at once felt remorse, and they lamented, quote, "For anyone inimical to Krishna, his 3 births, seminal, Brahminical, and sacrificial, are all condemned. On the other hand, these womenfolk, who have not undergone the purificatory processes of the Brahminical class or performed any austerity or pious rituals, have through devotion for Krishna easily cut off the bondage of death. Since Lord Krishna's every desire is completely fulfilled, his begging for food was simply an act of mercy toward us Brahmanas. All the fruits of Vedic sacrifice, indeed all things on earth, are his opulences, and yet out of ignorance we could not appreciate this fact." End quote. Having spoken thus, all the Brahmanas offered their obeisances to Lord Sri Krishna, hoping to counteract their offense. Nevertheless, out of fear of King Kamsa, they did not go to see the Lord in person. Text 1. The cowherd boys said, "O Ram, Ram, mighty armed one, O Krishna, chastiser of the wicked, we are being harassed by hunger, and you should do something about it." Purport. The cowherd boys jokingly implied that since Sri Krishna is the subduer of all bad things, the Lord should subdue their hunger by arranging for them to eat. In this statement by the cowherd boys, we observe the intimate loving friendship they enjoyed with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 2. Shukadev Goswami said, "Thus entreated by the cowherd boys, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the son of Devaki, replied as follows, desiring to please certain of his devotees who were Brahmana's wives." Text 3. Lord Krishna said, Please go to the sacrificial arena where a group of brahmanas learned in the Vedic injunctions are now performing the Angiras sacrifice to gain promotion to heaven. Text 4. When you go there, my dear cowherd boys, simply request some food. Declare to them the name of my elder brother, the Supreme Lord Balaram, and also my name, and explain that you have been sent by us. Purport. Lord Krishna encouraged his boyfriends to request charity without being embarrassed. In case the boys felt they had no right to personally approach such respectable brahmanas, the Lord told them to mention the names of Balaram and Krishna, the holy names of God. Text 5. Thus instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the cowherd boys went there and submitted their request. They stood before the brahmanas with palms joined in supplication, and then fell flat on the ground to offer respect. Text 6. The cowherd boys said, O earthly gods, please hear us. We cowherd boys are executing the orders of Krishna, and we have been sent here by Balaram. We wish all good for you. Please acknowledge our arrival. Purport. The word Bhumi Deva, quote, gods on earth, end quote, refers here to the brahmanas, who are supposed to closely represent the will of the Supreme Lord. The philosophy of Krishna consciousness is not a primitive polytheistic doctrine holding that human beings are on the earth are gods. Rather, it is a science that traces the descent of authority from the Absolute Truth himself, Shri Krishna. The authority and power of God naturally extend along with the extension of his creation, and on earth, the Lord's will and authority are represented by purified, enlightened men called brahmanas. This account will illustrate that the ritualistic brahmanas approached by the cowherd boys were not at all properly enlightened, and thus could not appreciate the position of Krishna and Balaram or that of their intimate associates. In fact, this pastime exposes the pretentious position of so-called brahmanas who are not faithful devotees of the Supreme Lord. Text 7. Lord Raman and Lord Achyuta are tending their cows not far from here. They are hungry and want you to give them some of your food. Therefore, O brahmanas, O best of knowers of religion, if you have faith, please give some food to them. Purport. The cowherd boys doubted the generosity of the brahmanas, and thus they used the word bubukshitao, meaning that Krishna and Balaram were hungry. The boys expected the brahmanas to know the Vedic injunction, anasya kshuditam patram, quote, anyone who is hungry is a fit candidate for receiving food in charity, end quote. But if the brahmanas would not recognize the authority of Krishna and Balaram, their title Dvija would be taken to mean merely, quote, born from two parents, end quote. Dvi, from two, ja, born, rather than, quote, twice born, end quote. When the brahmanas did not respond to the cowherd boys' initial request, the boys addressed the brahmanas with a slight trace of sarcasm as Dharma Vitama, quote, O best of the knowers of religion, end quote. Text 8. Except during the interval between the initiation of the performer of a sacrifice and the actual sacrifice of the animal, O most pure brahmanas, it is not a contaminating for even the initiated to partake of food, at least in sacrifices other than the Shotramani. Purport. The cowherd boys anticipated the possible rejection from the brahmanas that they couldn't give the boys any food because they themselves had not yet eaten, and that a priest initiated to perform a sacrifice should not eat. Therefore, the boys humbly informed the brahmanas about various technicalities of ritualistic sacrifice. The cowherd boys were not unaware of the formalities of Vedic culture, but their real intention was simply to render loving service to Lord Krishna. Text 9. The brahmanas heard this supplication from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, yet they refused to pay heed. Indeed, they were full of petty desires and entangled in elaborate rituals. Though presuming themselves advanced in Vedic learning, they were actually inexperienced fools. Purport. These childish brahmanas were full of petty desires, such as the desire to attain to material heaven, and therefore they could not recognize the golden transcendental opportunity offered them by the arrival of Krishna's personal boyfriends. Presently, throughout the world, people are madly pursuing materialist advancement and thus cannot hear the message of the Supreme Lord Krishna that is being broadcast through the missionary activities of the Krishna consciousness movement. Times have hardly changed, and proud materialistic priests are still prevalent on the earth. Text 11. Although the ingredients of sacrificial performance, the place, time, particular paraphernalia, mantras, rituals, priests, fires, demigods, performer, offering, and the as yet unseen beneficial results are all simply aspects of his opulence, the Brahmanas saw Lord Krishna as an ordinary human because of their perverted intelligence. They failed to recognize that he is the supreme absolute truth, the directly manifest personality of Godhead, whom the material senses cannot ordinarily perceive. Thus, bewildered by their false identification with the mortal body, they did not show him proper respect. Purport. The ritualistic Brahmanas could not understand why the sacrificial food should be offered to Lord Krishna, whom they considered an ordinary human being, just as a person with rose-colored glasses sees the entire world as rose-colored. A conditioned soul with mundane vision sees even God himself as mundane, and thus loses the opportunity to go back home, back to Godhead. Text 12. When the Brahmanas failed to reply, even with a simple yes or no, the chastiser of the enemy, Pricket, the coward boys returned disappointed to Krishna and Ram, and reported this to them. Text 13. Hearing what had happened, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord of the universe, simply laughed. He then again addressed the coward boys, showing them the way men act in this world. Purport. By laughing, Lord Krishna indicated to the coward boys that they need not be angry at the ritualistic Brahmanas, but should understand that one who begs will often be refused. Text 14. Lord Krishna said, "Tell the wives of the Brahmanas that I have come here with Lord Shankarshan. They will certainly give you all the food you want, for they are most affectionate toward me, and, indeed, with their intelligence reside in me alone." Purport. While physically the wives of the Brahmanas remained at home, within their minds they resided in the Supreme Lord Krishna because of intense affection for him. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the reason Lord Krishna did not have the coward boys tell the Brahmanas' wives he was hungry is that he knew this would severely distress these devoted ladies. Simply out of affection for Lord Krishna, however, the wives would be happy to give all the food requested of them. They would not heed their husbands' prohibitions, since they resided within the Lord through their transcendental intelligence. Text 15. The cowherd boys then went to the house where the Brahmanas' wives were staying. There the boys saw those chaste ladies sitting, nicely decorated with fine ornaments. Bowing down to the Brahmana ladies, the boys addressed them in all humility. Text 16. The cowherd boys said, "Obeisances unto you, O wives of the learned Brahmanas. Kindly hear our words. We have been sent here by Lord Krishna, who is passing by not far from here." Text 17. He has come a long way with the cowherd boys and Lord Balaram tending the cows. Now he is hungry, so some food should be given to him and his companions. Text 18. The wives of the Brahmanas were always eager to see Krishna, and for their minds had been enchanted by descriptions of him. Then, as soon as they heard he had come, they became very excited. Text 19. Taking along in large vessels all the four kinds of foods, full of fine tastes and aromas, all the ladies went forth to meet their beloved, just as rivers flow toward the sea. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the wives of the Brahmanas experienced conjugal feelings toward Krishna as if he were their paramour, and thus they could not be checked as they rushed to see him. Text 21. Although their husbands, brothers, sons, and other relatives tried to forbid them from going, their hope of seeing Krishna, cultivated by extensive hearing of his transcendental qualities, won out. Along the river Yamuna, with its garden decorated with buds of Ashoka trees, they caught sight of him strolling along in the company of the cowherd boys and his elder brother, Balaram. Text 22. His complexion was dark blue and his garment golden, wearing a peacock feather, colored minerals, sprigs of flower buds, and a garland of forest flowers and leaves. He was dressed just like a dramatic dancer. He rested one hand upon the shoulder of a friend, and with the other twirled a lotus. Lilies graced his ears, his hair hung down over his cheeks, and his lotus-like face was smiling. Text 23. O ruler of men, for a long time these Brahmana ladies had heard about Krishna, their beloved, and his glories had become the constant ornaments of their ears. Indeed, their minds were always absorbed in him. Through the apertures of their eyes, they now forced him to enter within their hearts. And then they embraced him within for a long time. In this way, they finally gave up the pain of separation from him, just as sages give up the anxiety of false ego by embracing their innermost consciousness. Text 24. Lord Krishna, who witnesses the thoughts of all creatures, understood how those ladies had abandoned all worldly hopes and come there simply to see him. Thus he addressed them as follows, with a smile upon his face. Text 25. Lord Krishna said, Welcome, O most fortunate ladies. Please sit down and make yourselves comfortable. What can I do for you? That you have come here to see me is most appropriate. Purport. Just as Sri Krishna welcomed the gopis who came to dance with him at night, he similarly welcomed the Brahmanas' wives, whose pure love for him was proved by their overcoming many instincts. The word upapanam indicates that although these ladies had rejected their husbands' orders, their behavior was not at all inappropriate, since their husbands had obviously tried to obstruct their loving service to Lord Krishna. Text 28:6. Certain expert personalities who can see their own true interest render unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service directly unto me, for I am most dear to the soul. Purport. The Supreme Lord informed the Brahmanas' wives that not only they, but all people who recognize their true self-interest take to the spiritual process of loving service to the Lord. Lord Krishna is Atma Priya, the real object of love for everyone. Although each individual has his own taste and freedom, ultimately every living being is a spiritual spark of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, everyone's primary loving attraction is constitutionally meant for Lord Sri Krishna. Loving service to the Lord should be ohitiki, without personal motive, and avyavahita, unobstructed by mental speculation, selfish desire, or any quirk of time and circumstance. Text 27. It is only by contact with the self that one's vital breath, intelligence, mind, friends, body, wife, children, wealth, and so on are dear. Therefore, what object can possibly be more dear than one's own self? Purport. The word yat samparkat in this verse refers to contact with the individual self and ultimately with the Supreme Self, the Lord, who is the origin of the original or individual living being. By developing Krishna consciousness, one automatically becomes self-realized, and thus one's vital strength, intelligence, mind, relatives, body, family, and wealth all become enhanced and brilliant by the central influence of Krishna consciousness. This happens because Krishna consciousness is the optimum efficient conjunction of the Supreme Self, who is pure consciousness, with the Supreme Self and Supreme Consciousness, Krishna. Text 28. You should thus return to the sacrificial arena because your husbands, the learned brahmanas, are householders and need your assistance to finish their respective sacrifices. Text 29. The wives of the brahmanas replied, O Almighty One, please do not speak such cruel words. Rather, you should fulfill your promise that you will always reciprocate with your devotees in kind. Now that we have attained your lotus feet, we simply wish to remain here in the forest so that we may carry upon our heads the garlands of tulsi leaves that fall from your lotus feet. We are ready to give up all material relationships. Purport. Here the Brahmana's wives are saying something similar to what the gopis say at the beginning of the rasa dance, Srimad Bhagavatam 10:29-31, when Lord Krishna tells them to go home as well. Like this verse, the gopis' statement begins with the words, Maivam bibo rati bhavan, gaditum nrishasham. Nigama refers to the Vedic literature, which states that one who surrenders at the lotus feet of the Lord does not return to this material world. Thus the Brahmana's wives appealed to the Lord that since they had surrendered to him, it was unfair for him to order them to return to their materialistic husbands. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Lord Krishna might have pointed out to the Brahmana's wives, quote, You young ladies are members of the aristocratic Brahmana community, so how can you surrender at the feet of a mere cowherd boy? End quote. To this, the ladies might have replied, quote, Since we have already surrendered at your lotus feet, and since we desire to become your servants, we are obviously not maintaining a false identification as members of the so-called Brahmana community. You can easily ascertain this from our words, end quote. The Lord might have replied, quote, I am a cowherd boy, and my proper maidservants and girlfriends are the cowherd girls, the gopis, end quote. The wives might have answered, quote, True, let them be so. Let them shine forth. If you are embarrassed in front of your relatives to make Brahmana ladies your maidservants, we certainly don't want to embarrass you. We will not go to your village, but rather will remain in Vrindavan like presiding deities of the forest. We simply desire to perfect our lives by even a slight trace of connection with you, end quote. Thus, by the spiritual insight of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, we learn that the Brahmana's wives offered to remain at a distance and simply to take the tulsi leaves that would fall from the lotus feet of Krishna or be crushed by the feet of his girlfriends when he would embrace them. The ladies offered to carry these tulsi leaves upon their heads, thus renouncing the desire to become Krishna's intimate girlfriends or maidservants, a position they knew was difficult to achieve. The young Brahmana ladies begged to remain in the Vrindavan forest. If the Lord had then asked, quote, Then what will your family members say, end quote, they would have replied, quote, We have already transcended our so-called relatives because we are seeing you, the Supreme Lord, face to face, end quote. Text 30. Our husbands, sons, fathers, brothers, and other relatives and friends will no longer take us back, and how could anyone else be willing to give us shelter? Therefore, since we have thrown ourselves at your lotus feet and have no other destination, please, O chastiser of the enemies, grant us our desire. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments as follows, quote, From their very youth, the Brahmana's wives had heard about Lord Krishna's beauty, qualities, and sweetness from the women folk in Vrindavan village and also from the flower ladies, the betel nut sellers, and others. Consequently, they always felt ecstatic love for Krishna and were indifferent to their household duties. Their husbands, seeing them as deviant, doubted them and avoided dealing with them as far as possible. Now the wives of the Brahmanas were ready to formally reject their so-called families and neighbors, and out of great agitation they were crying and placing their heads upon Lord Krishna's lotus feet, offering obeisances. In this way, with choking voices, they spoke the above verse. They begged that Lord Krishna should bestow upon them the benediction that he will be their only destination, that he, the chastiser of the enemies, subdue all their enemies, those difficulties obstructing them from attaining the Lord. End quote. Text 31. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, "Rest assured that your husbands will not be inimical toward you, nor will your fathers, brothers, sons, or other relatives, or the general populace. I will personally advise them of the situation. Indeed, even the demigods will express their approval." Text 32. For you to remain in my bodily association would certainly not please people in this world, nor would it be the best way for you to increase your love for me. Rather, you should fix your minds upon me, and very soon you will achieve me. Purport. The Lord pointed out that people in general would not appreciate a loving affair between Lord Krishna, who superficially was appearing as a cowherd boy, and the wives from the Brahmana community. Also, the Brahmana lady's own devotion and love would increase most efficiently in separation. In other words, it would be best all around if they continued to fix their minds on Lord Krishna and thus went on with the process they had been practicing throughout their lives. The Lord and his bona fide representative, the spiritual master, expertly engaged the Lord's devotees in very different types of service so that all of them can quickly return to his lotus feet. Text 33. It is just by hearing about me, seeing my deity form, meditating upon me, and chanting my names and glories that love for me develops, not by physical proximity. Therefore, please go back to your homes. Text 34. Srila Shukadeva Goswami said, "Thus instructed, the wives of the Brahmanas returned to the place of sacrifice. The Brahmanas did not find any fault with their wives, and together with them they finished the sacrifice." Purport. The wives of the Brahmanas obeyed Lord Krishna's order and returned to the sacrificial arena of their husbands, whereas the gopis, although ordered by Krishna to go home, remained in the forest to dance with him through the full moon night. Both the gopis and the Brahmanas' wives achieved pure love of Godhead. Text 35. One of the ladies had been forcibly kept back by her husband. When she heard the others describe the Supreme Lord Krishna, she embraced him within her heart and gave up her material body, the basis of bondage to material activity. Purport. The lady described here was especially devoted to Lord Krishna. Upon giving up her material body, she immediately attained a spiritual body and left the sacrificial arena to join the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 36. Govinda, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, fed the cowherd boys with that food of 4 varieties. Then the all-powerful Lord himself partook of the preparations. Text 37. Thus the Supreme Lord, appearing like a human being to perform his pastimes, imitated the ways of human society. He enjoyed pleasing his cows, cowherd boyfriends, and cowherd girlfriends with his beauty, words, and attraction and actions. Text 38. The Brahmanas then came to their senses and began to feel great remorse. They thought, quote, "We have sinned, for we have denied the request of the 2 lords of the universe, who deceptively appeared as ordinary human beings." End quote. Purport. Lord Krishna and Lord Balaram did not try to deceive the Brahmanas. They straightforwardly requested food from them. Rather, the Brahmanas deceived themselves, as indicated by the Sanskrit word Nri Vedambayo, which means that Krishna and Balaram are bewildering for an ordinary human being who considers them also to be human. Still, because the wives of the Brahmanas were great devotees of the Lord, the foolish Brahmanas received spiritual benefit and finally came to their senses. Text 39. Taking note of their wives' pure transcendental devotion for Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, And seeing their own lack of devotion, the Brahmanas felt most sorrowful and began to condemn themselves. Text 40. The Brahmanas said, "To hell with our threefold birth, to our vow of celibacy, and our extensive learning. To hell with our aristocratic background and our expertise in the rituals of sacrifice. These are all condemned because we were inimical to the transcendental personality of Godhead." Purport. As explained in the definitions above, the words Tri Vrid Janma, quote, threefold birth, refer to 1. Physical birth, 2. Brahminical initiation, and 3. Initiation into the performance of Vedic sacrifice. Everything is useless if one is ignorant of the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord Krishna. Text 41. The illusory potency of the Supreme Lord certainly bewilders even the great mystics. What to speak of us? As Brahmanas, we are supposed to be the spiritual masters of all classes of men, yet we have been bewildered about our own real self-interest. Text 42. Just see the unlimited love these women have developed for Lord Krishna, the spiritual master of the entire universe. This love has broken for them the very bonds of death, their attachment to family life. Report. Superficially, the husbands, fathers, fathers-in-law, and so on were the ladies' gurus or teachers. Yet the women had become perfect in Krishna consciousness, whereas the men had fallen into the darkness of ignorance. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, upon returning home, the ladies showed transcendental ecstatic symptoms, such as trembling of the body, shedding of tears, standing of the bodily hairs on end, discoloration of the complexion, crying out, quote, "O pleasure of my life, O Krishna," end quote, with faltering words, and so forth. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur goes on to state that while one may object that it is not fitting for a woman to love anyone other than her husband, here the husbands themselves point out that they are gurus only in imitation of the Supreme Lord, who is Jagat Guru, the universal teacher and spiritual master. The husbands noted that the women, having perfected their transcendental attachment for Krishna, did not have even a trace of attachment left for home, husband, children, and so forth. Therefore, from that day on, the husbands accepted those ladies as their worshipable spiritual masters and no longer thought of them as their wives or property. Text 44. These women have never undergone the purificatory rites of the twice-born classes, nor have they lived as brahmacharis in the ashram of the spiritual master, nor have they executed austerities, speculated on the nature of the self, followed the formalities of cleanliness, or engaged in pious rituals. Nevertheless, they have firm devotion for Lord Krishna, whose glories are chanted by the exalted names of the Vedas, and who is the supreme master of all masters of mystic power. We, on the other hand, have no such devotion for the Lord, although we have executed all these processes. Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the husbands were not aware that their wives had occasionally associated with the residents of Vrindavan, such as the flower ladies, and had heard about the beauty and qualities of Krishna. The Brahmanas were astonished at their wives' loving devotion for Lord Krishna, not realizing that this devotion had developed as a result of hearing and chanting about the Lord in association of his pure devotees. Text 45. Indeed, infatuated as we are with our household affairs, we have deviated completely from the real aim of our life. But now just see how the Lord, through the words of these simple cowherd boys, has reminded us of the ultimate destination of all true transcendentalists. Text 46. Otherwise, why would the Supreme Controller, whose every desire is already fulfilled and who is the Master of Liberation and all other transcendental benedictions, enact this pretense with us, who are always to be controlled by him? Purport. Although Lord Krishna is the absolute truth, he humbly sent his cowherd boyfriends to beg food from the Brahmanas. In so doing, he exposed the Brahmana's foolish arrogance and established the glories of his own transcendental beauty by attracting their very wives to surrender at his lotus feet. Text 47. Hoping for the touch of his lotus feet, the goddess of fortune perpetually worships him alone, leaving aside all others and renouncing her pride and fickleness. That he begs is certainly astonishing to everyone. Purport. The Supreme Master of the Goddess of Fortune herself obviously does not have to beg for food, as pointed out here by the Brahmanas, who are finally manifesting real spiritual intelligence. Text 49. All the aspects of sacrifice, the auspicious time and place, the various items of paraphernalia, the Vedic hymns, the prescribed rituals, the priests, the sacrificial fires, the demigods, the patron of the sacrifice, the sacrificial offering, and the pious results obtained, all are simply manifestations of his opulences. Yet even though we have heard that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, is the Lord of all mystic controllers, had taken birth in the outer dynasty, we were so foolish that we could not recognize Sri Krishna to be none other than him. Text 50. Let us offer our obeisances unto Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His intelligence is never bewildered, whereas we, confused by the power of illusion, are simply wandering about on the paths of fruitive work. Text 51. We are bewildered by Lord Krishna's illusory potency and thus could not understand his influence as the original personality of Godhead. Now we hope he will kindly forgive our offense. Text 52. Thus, reflecting on the sin they had committed by neglecting Lord Krishna, they became very eager to see him. But, being afraid of King Kamsa, they did not dare go to Vraja. Purport. Realizing their offense against Lord Krishna and finally appreciating his almighty position, the Brahmanas naturally wanted to rush to Vraja and surrender at the lotus feet of the Lord. But they were afraid that Kamsa would certainly kill them when his spies reported that they had gone to Krishna. The Brahmanas' wives were absorbed in ecstatic Krishna consciousness and thus went to Krishna anyway, just as the gopis, simply to dance with the Lord, traveled in the dead of night through a forest inhabited by wild animals. But the Brahmanas were not on such an advanced platform of Krishna consciousness, and thus, overcome by fear of Kamsa, could not see the Lord face to face. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada to the 10th Canto, 23rd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Brahmana's Wives Blessed. The following is a free-for-download audiobook via Google Drive. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 24, Worshipping Govardhan Hill. In this chapter, Lord Sri Krishna crushes the pride of Indra by prohibiting a sacrifice intended for him and initiating a substitute sacrifice in worship of Govardhan Hill. When Sri Krishna saw the cowherd men busily preparing for a sacrifice to Indra, he inquired about it from their king, Nanda. Nanda explained that the rain is given by Indra enables all living entities to maintain their lives, and therefore this sacrifice would be executed to satisfy him. Krishna responded, quote, "It is because of karma alone that living entities take their birth in a certain body, experience varieties of happiness and suffering in that body, and then give it up as the karma pertaining to it runs out. Thus, it is karma alone that is our enemy, our friend, our guru, and our Lord, and Indra can do nothing to alter the happiness and distress of anyone, for everyone is tightly bound by his karmic reactions. The material modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance bring about the creation, maintenance, and destruction of this world. The clouds bring forth rain when they are impelled by the mode of passion, and the cowherds prosper by protecting the cows. Furthermore, the cowherd's proper residence is in the forest and on the hills. Therefore, you should offer worship to the cows, the brahmanas, and Govardhan Hill." End quote. After Krishna spoke thus, he arranged for the cowherd men to worship Govardhan with the paraphernalia collected for the sacrifice to Indra. He then assumed a huge, unprecedented transcendental form and devoured all the food and other offerings presented to Govardhan. As he did so, he proclaimed to the cowherd community that although they had worshipped Indra for so long, he had never appeared in person, whereas Govardhan himself had now manifested before their eyes and eaten all their offerings of foodstuffs. Therefore, they should all now offer obeisances to Govardhan Hill. Then Lord Krishna joined the cowherds in offering obeisances to his newly assumed form. Text 1. Shukadeva Goswami said, "While staying in that very place with his brother Baladev, Lord Krishna happened to see the cowherd men busily arranging for a sacrifice to Indra." Purport. According to Srila Sridhar Swami and other acharyas, the word tatra eva used in this verse indicate that Lord Krishna stayed in the village of the Brahmanas whose wives had satisfied him by their devotion. Thus, he gave his mercy to those Brahmanas as well as to their chaste wives who had no one to associate with except their husbands. In that place, the cowherd men, headed by Lord Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, were somehow or other preparing an elaborate sacrifice to Lord Indra, and Lord Krishna reacted as follows. Text 2. Being the omniscient supersoul, the Supreme Lord Krishna already understood the situation, yet he still humbly inquired from the elders, headed by his father Nanda Maharaj. Purport. Lord Krishna was eager to enact his pastime of lifting Govardhan Hill and defeating the false pride of Indra, and thus he cleverly inquired from his father about the imminent sacrifice. Text 3. Lord Krishna said, "My dear father, please explain to me what this great endeavor of yours is all about. What is it meant to accomplish? If this is a ritual sacrifice, then for whose satisfaction is it intended, and by what means is it going to be executed?" Text 4. Please tell me about it, O Father. I have a great desire to know, and am ready to hear it in good faith. Certainly, no secrets are to be kept by saintly personalities who see all others as equal to themselves, who have no conception of, quote, mine, end quote, or, quote, another's, end quote, and who do not consider who is friend, who is an enemy, and who is neutral. Purport. Lord Krishna's father might have thought that his son was a mere child and thus could not properly question the validity of a Vedic sacrifice. But the Lord's clever statement here would certainly have convinced Nanda that Sri Krishna was making a serious, not a whimsical inquiry, and that a serious answer should thus be given. Text 5. One who is neutral may be avoided like an enemy, but a friend should be considered like one's own self. Purport. Even if Nanda Maharaj did not see friends, enemies, and neutral parties as entirely equal, Lord Krishna, being Nanda Maharaj's son, was certainly a most trustworthy friend and should therefore not be left out of intimate discussions. In other words, Nanda Maharaj might have thought that as a householder he could not act on the highest saintly platform, and thus Lord Krishna finished additional reasons why his father should trust him and reveal the entire purpose of the sacrifice. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, Nanda Maharaj stood silent, doubting his position of parental aloofness, since Garga Muni had predicted that his son would be, quote, equal to Narayan in his qualities, end quote, and the young boy had already conquered and killed many powerful demons. Text 6. When people in this world perform activities, sometimes they understand what they're doing and sometimes they don't. Those who know what they're doing achieve success in their work, whereas ignorant people do not. Purport. The Lord here informs his father that people should perform a particular ceremony or activity only after thoroughly understanding it through discussion with friends. We should not be blind followers of tradition. If a person doesn't even know what he's doing, how can he be successful in his work? This, essentially, is the Lord's argument in this verse. Since Sri Krishna, as the young child of Nanda, would naturally be expected to show enthusiasm for his father's religious activities, it was the father's duty to give the son a thorough explanation of the ceremony. Text 7. Such being the case, this ritualistic endeavor of yours should be clearly explained to me. Is it a ceremony based on scriptural injunction, or simply a custom of ordinary society? Text 8. Nanda Maharaj replied, "The great Lord Indra is the controller of the rain. The clouds are his personal representatives, and they directly provide rainwater, which gives happiness and sustenance to all creatures." Purport. Without clear rainwater, the earth could not possibly provide food and drink for anyone, nor could there be cleanliness. Thus, it would be difficult to overestimate the value of rain. Text 9. Not only we, my dear son, but also many other men worship him, the Lord and Master of the rain-giving clouds. We offer him grain and other paraphernalia of worship produced through his own discharge in the form of rain. Purport. Nanda Maharaj patiently tried to explain the, quote, facts of life to his young son, Sri Krishna, but in fact, Nanda and all the residents of Vrindavan would learn an astonishing lesson, as explained in this chapter. Text 10. By accepting the remnants of sacrifices performed to Indra, people sustain their lives and accomplish the threefold aims of religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. Thus, Lord Indra is the agent responsible for the fruitive success of industrious people. Purport. One might object that people sustain themselves by farming, industry, and so on. But, as previously mentioned, all human and non-human endeavor depends on food and drink, which cannot be produced without ample rain. By the word Trivarga, Nanda further points out that the prosperity achieved through sacrifice for Indra is merely not meant merely for sense gratification, but also for religiosity and economic development. Unless people are well fed, it is difficult for them to execute their duties, and without performance of duty, it is very difficult to be religious. Text 11. This religious principle is based on sound tradition. Anyone who rejects it out of lust, enmity, fear, or greed will certainly fail to achieve good fortune. Purport. If a person neglects his religious duties because of lust, envy, fear, or greed, his life will never be brilliant or perfect. Text 12. Shukadeva Goswami said, when Lord Keshava Krishna heard the statements of his father Nanda and other senior residents of Vraja, he addressed his father as follows, to arouse anger in Lord Indra. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that Lord Krishna's intention was not simply to insult a demigod, but rather to knock down the great mountain of false pride that had arisen within the Lord's tiny servant who was supposed to represent the Lord as Indra. By lifting Govardhan Hill, Lord Krishna would thus initiate a blissful annual festival called Govardhan Puj, and he would further enjoy the pleasant pastime of dwelling for several days beneath the hill with all his loving devotees. Text 13. Lord Krishna said, it is by the force of karma that a living entity takes birth, and it is by karma alone that he meets his destruction. His happiness, distress, fear, and sense of serenity all arise as the effects of karma. Purport. Lord Krishna minimized the importance of the demigods by speaking the philosophy known as Karmavada or Karma Mimamsa, which basically is atheism with a belief in reincarnation. According to this philosophy, there are subtle laws of nature that reward or punish us according to how we act. Quote, as you sow, so shall you reap, end quote. In a future life, one reaps the fruit of his present work, and this is the sum and substance of reality. Lord Krishna, being God himself, could hardly be a serious proponent of this mediocre philosophy. In the role of a young boy, he was simply teasing his pure devotees by preaching it. Srila Jiva Goswami points out that Lord Krishna was thinking, quote, "Why are these eternal associates of mine, appearing as my father and other relatives and friends, so caught up in this worship of Indra?" End quote. Thus, although the Lord's main purpose was to take away the false pride of Indra, he also wanted to remind his eternal devotees that they need not divert their attention to other so-called gods, since in fact his devotees were already living with the Supreme Absolute Truth, the Almighty Lord himself. Text 14. Even if there is some supreme controller who awards all others the results of their activities, he must also depend on the performers engaging in activity. After all, there is no question of being the bestower of fruitive results unless fruitive activities have actually been performed. Purport. Here, Lord Krishna argues that if there is a supreme controller, he must depend on the performer of activity to reciprocate with, and must therefore also be subject to the laws of karma, being obliged to award happiness and distress to the conditioned souls according to the laws of good and evil. This superficial argument neglects the obvious point that the laws of nature that prescribe the good and bad results of pious and impious acts are themselves creations of the all-good Supreme Lord. Being the creator and sustainer of these laws, the Lord is not subject to them. Furthermore, the Lord is not dependent on the work of conditioned souls, since he is satisfied and complete within himself. Out of his all-merciful nature, he awards the results appropriate to our activities. That which we call destiny, fate, or karma is an elaborate and subtle system of rewards and punishments meant for gradually encouraging conditioned souls to evolve to the stage of perfect consciousness, which is their original constitutional nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead has so dexterously formulated and applied the laws of material nature governing punishment and reward for human behavior, that the living being is discouraged from sin and encouraged toward goodness without suffering any significant interference with his free will as an eternal soul. In contrast to the material nature, the Lord exhibits his essential nature in the spiritual world, where he reciprocates the eternal love of his pure devotees. Such loving affairs are based completely on the mutual freedom of the Lord and his devotees, not on a mechanical reciprocation of coinciding selfish interests. The Supreme Lord, assisted by his pure devotees, repeatedly offers the conditioned souls of this world the opportunity to give up their bizarre attempt at exploiting the material universe and go back home, back to Godhead, for an eternal life of bliss and knowledge. Considering all these points, the atheistic arguments given here by Lord Krishna in a playful mood are not to be taken seriously. Text 15. Living entities in this world are forced to experience the consequences of their own particular previous work. Since Lord Indra cannot in any way change the destiny of human beings, which is born of their own nature, why should people worship him? Purport. Lord Krishna's argument here is not a negation of free will. If one accepts the existence of karma as a system of laws awarding reactions to for our present activities, then we ourselves, according to our nature, will decide our future. Our happiness and distress in this life have already been adjudicated and fixed according to our previous activities, and not even the demigods can change that. They must award us the prosperity or poverty, sickness or health, happiness or distress due us by our previous work. However, we still retain the freedom to select a pious or impious mode of activity in this life, and the choice we make will determine our future suffering and enjoyment. For example, if I was pious in my last life, in this life the demigods may award me great material wealth. But I am free to spend my riches for good or for bad purposes, and my choice will determine my future life. Thus, although no one can change the karmic results due him in this life, everyone still retains his free will by which he determines what his future situation will be. Lord Krishna's argument here is quite interesting. However, it neglects the overriding consideration that we are all eternal servants of God and must satisfy him by all that we do. Text 16. Every individual is under the control of his own conditioned nature, and he must thus follow that nature. This entire universe, with all its demigods, demons, and human beings, is based on the conditioned nature of the living entities. Purport. Lord Krishna here elaborates upon the argument given in the previous verse. Since everything depends on svabhava, or one's conditioned nature, why bother worshipping God or the demigods? This argument would be sublime if svabhava, or conditioned nature, were all-powerful, but unfortunately it is not. There is a supreme controller, and we must worship him, as Lord Krishna will emphatically reveal in this chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam. For now, however, he is content to tease his relatives. Text 17. Because it is karma that causes the conditioned living entity to accept and then give up different high and low-grade material bodies, this karma is his enemy, friend, and neutral witness, his spiritual master, and controlling lord. Purport. Even the demigods are bound and limited by the laws of karma. That Indra himself is subordinate to the laws of karma is explicitly stated in the Brahma Samhita 554. Yas twindar gopam ata vedam aho shvakarma bandhanurupa phalam bhajanam atanoti. The Supreme Lord, Govinda, awards all creatures the appropriate results of their work. This is as true for mighty Indra, the Lord of all of the material heavens, as it is for the germ called Indra Gopa. The Bhagavad Gita 7.20 also states, Kamastas terhitagyan prapadyante devata. Only those who have lost their intelligence because of various material desires surrender unto demigods rather than worship the Supreme Lord. In fact, the demigods cannot award benefits to anyone independently, as stated by Lord Krishna in the Gita, Mayaiva Vihitam Hitan. All benefits are ultimately issued by the Lord himself. Thus, it is not altogether incorrect to say that demigod worship is useless, since even the demigods are under the control of the laws of karma. In fact, this is the case. But Lord Krishna, the supreme absolute truth, is not subordinate to the law of karma. Rather, he can independently offer or withhold his favor. This is confirmed in the verse from the Brahma Samhita quoted above, the third line of which is Karmani niradati kintu bhakti bhajam. Quote, the Supreme Lord burns up all the accumulated karma of those engaged in his loving service. End quote. Not only is Lord Krishna above the laws of material action and reaction, but he can immediately dissolve these laws for anyone who satisfies him through loving service. Thus, the Almighty God is supreme in absolute freedom, and by surrendering to him, we can escape the bonds of karma and stop accepting their dismal rule as supreme. Text 18. Therefore, one should seriously worship work itself. A person should remain in the position corresponding to his nature and should perform his own duty. Indeed, that by which we may live nicely is really our worshipable deity. Purport. Lord Krishna here proposes the modern, if absurd, philosophy that our work or occupation is really God, and that we should therefore simply worship our work. Upon close scrutiny, we observe that our work is nothing more than the interaction of the material body with material nature, as Lord Krishna himself states in a more serious mood in the Bhagavad Gita 3.28. Guna guneshu vartanta. Karma Mamsa philosophy accepts that good activity in this life will give us a better next life. If this is true, then there must be some type of conscious soul different from the body. And if that is the case, why should a transcendental soul worship the interaction of the temporary body with material nature? If the words Shampujayat karma here mean that one should worship the laws of karma governing our activities, then one may astutely ask what it means to worship laws, and indeed what might be the origin of such laws and who is maintaining them. To say that laws have created or are maintaining the world is a meaningless proposition, since there is nothing about the law on the nature of a law that indicates it could generate the existential situation that it is supposed to govern. In fact, worship is meant for Krishna himself, and this real conclusion will be clearly revealed in this chapter. Text 19. If one thing is actually sustaining our life, but we take shelter of something else, how can we achieve any real benefit? We would be like an unfaithful woman who can never achieve any actual benefit by consorting with her paramour. Purport. The word kshamam means actual prosperity, not merely the accumulation of money. Here, Lord Krishna boldly argues that just as a woman can never achieve actual dignity or enlightenment from an illicit lover, the residents of Vrindavan will never be happy by neglecting the real source of their prosperity and worshipping Indra instead. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the audacity that child Krishna displayed before his father and other elders should be understood as an exhibition of transcendental anger aroused when he saw that his eternal devotees worshipping an insignificant demigod. Text 20. The Brahmana maintains his life by studying and teaching the Vedas, a member of the royal order by protecting the earth, the Vaishya by trade, and the Shudra by serving the higher twice-born classes. Purport. After glorifying karma, or work, Lord Krishna now explains what he means by prescribed duties born of one's nature. He was not referring to any whimsical activity, but rather to the religious duties prescribed in the Varnashram, or Vedic social system. Text 21. The occupational duties of the Vaishya are conceived in 4 divisions: farming, commerce, cow protection, and money lending. Out of these, we, as a community, are always engaged in cow protection. Text 22. The causes of creation, maintenance, and destruction are the 3 modes of nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. In particular, the mode of passion creates this universe, and through sexual combination causes it to become full of variety. Purport. Anticipating the possible objection that a livelihood based on cows certainly depends on Lord Indra, who supplies rain, Lord Krishna here introduces a mechanistic theory of existence known as atheistic Sankhya. The tendency to attribute exclusive causality to the apparently mechanistic functions of nature is an old tendency indeed. 5,000 years ago, Lord Krishna referred to a doctrine already well known in human society. Text 23. Impelled by the material mode of passion, the clouds pour down their rain everywhere and their sustenance. What has the great Indra to do with his arrangement? Report. Lord Krishna continues his mechanistic explanation of existence in concluding, Mahendra Kim Karishyati, quote, who needs the great Indra, since the rain sent by the clouds, which in turn are impelled by the mode of passion, is actually producing everyone's food, end quote. The word sarvata indicates that the clouds magnanimously send their rain even on the ocean, rocks, and barren land, where there is apparently no necessity for such sweet water. Text 24. My dear Father, our home is not in the cities or towns or villages. Being forest dwellers, we always live in the forest and on the hills. Purport. Lord Krishna here points out that the residents of Vrindavan should recognize their relationship with Govardhan Hill and with the forests of Vrindavan and not worry about a distant demigod like Indra. Having concluded his argument, Lord Krishna makes a radical proposal in the following verse. Text 25. Therefore, may a sacrifice for the pleasure of the cows, the brahmanas, and Govardhan Hill begin. With all the paraphernalia collected for worshipping Indra, let this sacrifice be performed instead. Purport. Lord Krishna is famous as Go Brahmanyahita, the well-wishing friend of the cows and the brahmanas. Lord Krishna specifically included the local brahmanas in his proposal because he is always devoted to those who are devoted to the godly Vedic culture. Text 26. Let many different kinds of food be cooked, from sweet rice to vegetable soups. Many kinds of fancy cakes, both baked and fried, should be prepared. All the available milk products should be taken for this sacrifice. Purport. The word supa indicates both bean broth and also liquid vegetables. Thus, to celebrate the Govardhan Puja, Lord Krishna called for hot preparations such as soup, cold preparations like sweet rice, and all types of milk products. Text 27. The Brahmanas who are learned in the Vedic mantras must properly invoke the sacrificial fires. Then you should feed the priests with nicely prepared food and reward them with cows and other gifts. Purport. According to Srila Dhira Swami, Lord Sri Krishna instructed his father and other residents of Vrindavan in the technical details of this Vedic sacrifice to assure the quality of the sacrifice, and also to inspire Nanda and the others with faith in the concept of such a sacrifice. Thus, the Lord mentioned that there must be orthodox brahmanas, regular sacrificial fires, and proper distribution of charity. All things were to be done in the order given by the Lord. Text 28. After giving the appropriate food to everyone else, such as fallen souls, such as dogs and dog-eaters, you should also give grass to the cows and then present your respectful offerings to Govardhan Hill. Text 29. After everyone has eaten to his satisfaction, you should all dress and decorate yourselves handsomely, smear your bodies with sandalwood paste, and then circumambulate the cows, the brahmanas, the sacrificial fires, and Govardhan Hill. Purport. Lord Krishna wanted all human beings, and even the animals, to eat Bhagavat Prasad, sanctified foods offered to the Lord. To enthuse his relatives with a festive mood, he requested them to dress beautifully with fine clothes and ornaments, and to refresh their bodies with luxurious sandalwood paste. The essential activity, however, was the circumambulation of the holy brahmanas, cows, sacrificial fires, and especially Govardhan Hill. Text 30. This is my idea, O Father, and you may carry it out if it appeals to you. Such a sacrifice will be very dear to the cows, the brahmanas, and Govardhan Hill, and also to me. Purport. Whatever is pleasing to the brahmanas, the cows, and the Supreme Lord himself is auspicious and beneficial for the entire world. Spiritually blind, quote, modern, end quote, people do not understand this and instead adopt a, quote, scientific, end quote, approach of life that is rapidly destroying the entire earth. Text 31. Shukadeva Goswami said, Lord Krishna, who is himself powerful time, desired to destroy the false pride of Lord Indra. When Nanda and the other senior men of Vrindavan heard Sri Krishna's statement, they accepted his words as proper. Text 32 and 33. The cowherd community then did all that Madhusudana had suggested. They arranged for the brahmanas to recite auspicious Vedic mantras, and using the paraphernalia that had been intended for Indra's sacrifice, they presented offerings to Govardhan Hill, and the brahmanas with reverential respect. They also gave grass to the cows. Then, placing the cows, bulls, and calves in front of them, they circumambulated Govardhan. Purport. The residents of Vrindavan were simply devoted to Lord Krishna. That was the sum and substance of their existence. Being the Lord's eternal associates, they were ultimately not concerned with Lord Indra or ritualistic sacrifice, and they were certainly not interested in the mechanistic philosophy that Krishna had just spoken to them. They simply loved Krishna, and out of intense affection, they did exactly what he had requested. Their simple, loving mentality was not small-mindedness or ignorance, since they were devoted to the Supreme Absolute Truth, who contains within himself all existence. Thus, the residents of Vrindavan constantly experienced the highest essential truth underlying all other truths, and that is Sri Krishna himself, the cause of all causes, and all that which sustains the existence of all that exists. The residents of Vrindavan were overwhelmed in loving service to that Supreme Absolute Truth. Therefore, they were the most fortunate, most intelligent, and most pragmatic of all living beings. Text 34. As the beautifully ornamented cowherd ladies followed along, riding on wagons drawn by oxen, they sang the glories of Lord Krishna, and their songs mingled with the Brahmanas' chanting of benedictions. Text 35. Krishna then assumed an unprecedented huge form to instill faith in the cowherd men, declaring, quote, "I am Govardhan Mountain," end quote. He ate the abundant offerings. Purport. In chapter 24 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada writes, quote, "When everything was complete, Krishna assumed a great transcendental form and declared to the inhabitants of Vrindavan that he was himself Govardhan Hill, in order to convince the devotees that Govardhan Hill and Krishna himself are identical. Then Krishna began to eat all the food offered there. The identity of Krishna and Govardhan Hill is still honored, and great devotees take rocks from Govardhan Hill and worship them exactly as they worship the deity of Krishna in the temples. The followers of the Krishna consciousness movement may therefore collect small rocks or pebbles from Govardhan Hill and worship them at home, because this worship is as good as deity worship," end quote. Lord Krishna had induced the residents of Vrindavan to assume a significant risk on his behalf. He convinced them to neglect a sacrifice to what is, after all, a powerful government of the universe, and to worship a hill called Govardhan instead. The cowherd community did this all simply out of love for Krishna, and now to convince them that their decision was correct, Lord Krishna appeared in an unprecedented, huge, transcendental form and demonstrated that he himself was Govardhan Hill. Text 36. Together with the people of Braja, the Lord bowed down to this form of Govardhan Hill, thus, in effect, offering obeisances to himself. Then he said, quote, "Just see how this hill has appeared in person and bestowed mercy upon us." Purport. It is clear from this verse that Lord Krishna had expanded himself and was appearing in his normal form among the festival goers of Vrindavan, while simultaneously manifesting himself as the great form of Govardhan Hill. Thus, in his form as a child, Krishna led the residents of Vrindavan in bowing down to his new incarnation as Govardhan Hill, and to all he pointed out the great mercy bestowed by this divine form of Govardhan. Lord Krishna's amazing transcendental activities were certainly in keeping with the festive atmosphere. Text 37. This Govardhan Hill, assuming any form he wishes, will kill any residents of the forest who neglect him. Therefore, let us pay our obeisances to him for the safety of ourselves and for our cows. Purport. Kama-rupi indicates that the form of Govardhan can manifest as poisonous snakes, wild animals, falling rocks, and so on, all of which are competent to kill a human being. According to Srila Sridhar Swami, the Lord presented 6 theoretical points in this chapter. Quote, number 1, that karma alone is sufficient to determine one's destiny. Number 2, that one's conditioned nature is the supreme controller. Number 3, that the modes of nature are the supreme controller. And that, number 4, the Supreme Lord is simply a dependent aspect of karma. Number 5, that he is under the control of karma. And number 6, that one's occupation is the actual worshipable deity. The Lord presented these arguments not because he believed them, but because he wanted to stop this impending sacrifice to Indra and divert it to himself in the form of Govardhan Hill. In this way, the Lord desired to agitate that falsely proud demigod. Text 38. The members of the cowherd community, having been thus inspired by Lord Vasudeva to properly execute the sacrifice to Govardhan Hill, the cows and the brahmanas, returned with Lord Krishna to their village, Vraja. Purport. Although the Govardhan Puja was performed in a blissful and successful way, the matter was hardly finished. Lord Indra is, after all, tremendously powerful, and he received the news of the Govardhan sacrifice with burning anger. What ensued will be described in the following chapter. Thus end the purports of the humble servants of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Dhira Swami Prabhupada to the 10th Canto, 24th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Worshipping Govardhan Hill. The following is a free for download audiobook available on Google Drive. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 25. Lord Krishna lifts Govardhan Hill. This chapter describes how Lord Indra was overcome by anger when the residents of Vraja cancelled his sacrifice, how he tried to punish them by sending forth a devastating rainfall to Vrindavan, and how Lord Sri Krishna protected Gokul by lifting Govardhan Hill and for 7 days using it as an umbrella to ward off the rain. Indra, angered at the disruption of the sacrifice meant for him, and falsely presuming himself the supreme controller, said, quote, "People often give up the pursuit of transcendental knowledge, the means for self-realization, and imagine that they can cross over the ocean of material existence by mundane fruitive sacrifices. Similarly, these cowherd men have become intoxicated by pride and have offended me by taking shelter of an ignorant, ordinary child, Krishna." End quote. To remove this supposed pride of the residents of Vraja, Indra sent the clouds known as Samvartaka, whose function is to facilitate the destruction of the world. He sent them to harass the Vrajavasis with downpours of rain and hail. The cowherd community was very disturbed by this and approached Krishna for shelter. Understanding that this trouble was the work of Indra, Krishna decided to smash to pieces Indra's false prestige, and thus he lifted Govardhan Hill with one hand. He then invited the entire cowherd community to take shelter in the dry space beneath the mountain. For 7 successive days he held up the hill until Indra finally understood Krishna's mystic power and ordered the clouds to withdraw. When the cowherd villagers emerged from beneath the mountain, Krishna put Govardhan Hill back in its proper place. The cowherds were in ecstasy, showing loving symptoms such as flowing tears and bodily hairs standing on end. They embraced Krishna and offered him benedictions according to their respective positions, while the demigods in heaven rained down flowers and sang the Lord's praises. Text 1. Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear King Cricket, when Indra understood that his sacrifice had been put aside, he became furious with Nanda Maharaj and the other cowherd men who were accepting Krishna as their Lord." Purport. At the very beginning of this chapter, Shukadeva Goswami reveals the foolishness of Indra and the absurdity of his anger. Indra was frustrated because the residents of Vrindavan accepted Sri Krishna as their Lord. But the simple fact is that Sri Krishna is the Lord, not only of the residents of Vrindavan, but of all that exists, including Indra himself. Thus, Indra's petulant reaction was ridiculous. As the common saying goes, quote, "Pride goes before a fall," end quote. Text 2. Angry Indra sent forth the clouds of universal destruction known as Samvartaka. Imagining himself the supreme controller, he spoke as follows. Purport. The word Ishamani here is very significant. Indra arrogantly considered himself to be the Lord, and thus he exhibited the typical attitude of a conditioned soul. Many thinkers in the 20th century have noted the exaggerated sense of individual prestige characteristic of our culture. Indeed, writers have even coined the phrase, quote, "the me generation," end quote. Everyone in this world is more or less guilty of the syndrome called Ishamana, or proudly considering oneself the Lord. Text 3. Indra said, "Just see how these cowherd men living in the forest have become so greatly intoxicated by their prosperity. They have surrendered to an ordinary human being, Krishna, and thus they have offended the gods." Purport. Of course, Indra was really saying that the cowherd men had offended him, Indra, by taking shelter of Krishna, whom Indra considered to be Martya, a mortal. This was certainly a gross miscalculation on Indra's part. Text 4. Their taking shelter of Krishna is just like the foolish attempt of men who abandon transcendental knowledge of the self and instead try to cross over the great ocean of material existence in the false boat of fruitive ritualistic sacrifices. Text 5. These cowherd men have acted inimically toward me by taking shelter of this ordinary human being, Krishna, who thinks himself very wise, but who is simply a foolish, arrogant, over-talkative child. Purport. According to Dhira Swami, although through the insults of Indra, goddess Saraswati is actually praising Krishna. The Acharya explains, quote, Vachalam means, quote, one who can speak according to Vedic authority, end quote. Balisham means, quote, free from pretension, just like a child. Stubdam means that he bows down to no one because there is no one for him to offer homage to. Agyam means that there is nothing more for him to know because he is omniscient. Pandit Maninam means that he is highly honored by the knowers of the Absolute Truth, and Krishnam means that he is the Supreme Absolute Truth, whose transcendental form is full of eternity and ecstasy. Martyam means that although he is the Absolute Truth, he nevertheless appears in this world as a human being out of affection for his devotees, end quote. Indra wanted to rebuke Krishna as Vachalam because the Lord had presented many audacious arguments in the line of Karma Mimamsa and Sankhya philosophy, although he did not accept these arguments. Thus Indra called the Lord Balisa, foolish. Indra called him Shtabda because he had spoken boldly even in the presence of his own father. Thus, although Indra attempted to criticize Sri Krishna, the Lord's transcendental character is in fact impeccable, and this chapter will demonstrate how Krishna came to recognize the position of the Lord. Text 6. To the clouds of destruction, King Indra said, the prosperity of these people has made them mad with pride, and their arrogance is backed up by Krishna. Now go and remove their pride, and bring their animals to destruction. Purport. It is clear from this verse that the residents of Vrindavan had become highly prosperous simply by protecting cows, since Indra wanted to destroy their so-called pride based on wealth by killing their animals. Well-tended cows produce large quantities of milk, from which come cheese, butter, yogurt, ghee, and so on. These foods are delicious by themselves and also enhance other foods, such as fruits, vegetables, and grains. Bread and vegetables are delicious with butter, and fruit is especially appetizing when mixed with cream or yogurt. Dairy products are always desirable in civilized society, and the surplus can be traded for many valuable commodities. Thus, simply by a Vedic dairy enterprise, the residents of Vrindavan were wealthy, healthy, and happy, even in the material sense, and most of them were all eternal associates of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Text 7. I will follow you to Vraja, riding on my elephant Ayurvata and taking with me the swift and powerful wind gods to decimate the cowherd village of Nanda Maharaj. Purport. The Samvartika clouds were frightened by Indra's powerful mood and thus carried out his order as described in the following verse. Text 8. Shukadeva Goswami said, on Indra's order, the clouds of universal destruction, released untimely from their bonds, went to the cowherd pastures of Nanda Maharaj. There they began to torment the inhabitants by powerfully pouring down torrents of rain upon them. Purport. The Samvartika clouds could cover the entire earth with a single vast ocean. With great strength, these clouds began flooding the simple land of Vraja. Text 9. Propelled by the fearsome wind gods, the clouds blazed with lightning bolts and roared with thunder as they hurled down hailstorms. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that the word Marudganai indicates the 7 great winds, such as Avaha, who presides over the region of Bhuvarloka, and Pravaha, who holds the planets in their places. Text 10. As the clouds released torrents of rain as thick as massive columns, the earth was submerged in the flood, and high ground could no longer be distinguished from low. Text 11. The cows and other animals, shivering from the excessive rain and wind, and all the cowherd men and ladies, pained by the cold, all approached Lord Govinda for shelter. Text 12. Trembling, with the distress brought about by the severe rainfall and trying to cover their heads and calves with their own bodies, the cows approached the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 13. The cowherd men and women addressed the Lord, Krishna, Krishna, O most fortunate one, please deliver the cows from the wrath of Indra. O Lord, you are so affectionate to your devotees. Please save us also. Purport. At the time of Lord Krishna's birth, Garga Muni had predicted, Anena sarva durgani yuyan anjas tarishyata, Srimad Bhagavatam 10.8.16. Quote, by his grace you will easily cross beyond all difficulties, end quote. The residents of Vrindavan were confident that in such a great emergency, Lord Sri Narayan would empower Krishna to protect them. They accepted Krishna as everything, and Krishna reciprocated their love. Text 14. Seeing the inhabitants of his Gokula rendered practically unconscious by the onslaught of hail and blasting wind, the Supreme Lord Hari understood that this was the work of angry Indra. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the severe distress Indra apparently inflicted upon the residents of Vrindavan was an arrangement made by Sri Krishna's pastime potency to enhance the loving dealings between the residents and the Lord. The Acharya gives the analogy that for a hungry person, the pain of hunger increases the happiness he feels when he finally eats excellent food, and thus hunger can be said to enhance the pleasure of eating. Similarly, the residents of Vrindavan, although not experiencing ordinary material anxiety, felt a type of distress at the activities of Indra and thus intensified their meditation on Krishna. When the Lord finally acted, the result was wonderful. Text 15. Sri Krishna said to himself, because we have stopped his sacrifice, Indra has caused this unusually fierce, unseasonable rain together with terrible winds and hail. Text 16. By my mystic power, I will completely counteract this disturbance caused by Indra. Demigods like Indra are proud of their opulence, and out of foolishness they falsely consider themselves the Lord of the universe. I will now destroy such ignorance. Text 16. Since the demigods are endowed with the mode of goodness, the false pride of considering oneself the Lord should certainly not affect them. When I break the false prestige of those bereft of goodness, my purpose is to bring them relief. Purport. The demigods are supposed to be Satbhava Yukta, endowed with spiritual existence, since they are deputed servants of the Supreme Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita 4.24, it is stated, Brahmarpanam Brahmahavir Brahmagno Brahmanahutam Brahmaiva Guna Artena Gantavyam Brahmakarma Samadhina. Quote, that which is duly offered to the Lord becomes spiritualized, end quote. The demigods engage in the devotional service of the Lord by managing various departments of cosmic administration. Therefore, as demigods or as servants of the Lord, their existence is pure, sadbhava. When the demigods fail to live up to the high position given them by the Lord and deviate from proper behavior, they are not acting as demigods, but rather as conditioned souls. Mana, or false prestige, is certainly an anxiety-ridden burden for the conditioned soul. A falsely proud person is not truly peaceful or satisfied, because his understanding of himself is false and inflated. When a servant of the Lord becomes asat, or irreligious, the Lord saves him from impiety by breaking the false prestige that has led him to be offensive or sinful. As stated by the Lord himself, Yasyaham anugrimanami arashetadam shanai. Quote, I give my blessings to a person by taking away his so-called opulence, end quote. Of course, the advanced stage of devotional service to the Lord, as described by Rupa Goswami, is yukta vairagya, utilizing the opulence in this world to execute the Lord's mission. Obviously, the things of this world can be used wonderfully to spread the glories of the Lord and to create a godly society, and a more advanced devotee will not be seduced by material paraphernalia, but will dutifully and honestly engage it solely for the pleasure of the Lord. In this particular case, Lord Indra forgot that he was a humble servant of the Lord, and Lord Krishna therefore arranged to bring this bewildered demigod to his senses. Text 18. I must therefore protect the cowherd community by my transcendental potency, for I am their shelter, I am their master, and indeed, they are my own family. After all, I have taken a vow to protect my devotees. Purport. The word much charanam indicates not only that Lord Krishna is the sole shelter for the Vrajajana, the people of Vrindavan, but also that Lord Krishna had established his home among them. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur quotes from the Anekarta Varga dictionary, Sharanam Griha Rakshitoro. Quote, the word Sharanam can represent either home or protector, end quote. The residents of Vrindavan adopted Krishna as their beloved child, friend, lover, and life itself, and the Lord reciprocated their feelings. Thus, Sri Krishna lived among those fortunate people, moving in their houses and fields. Naturally, he would protect such intimate devotees from all types of danger. Text 19. Having said this, Lord Krishna, who is Vishnu himself, picked up Govardhan Hill with one hand and held it aloft, just as easily as a child picks up a mushroom. Purport. It is confirmed in the Harivamsa that Sri Krishna picked up the Govardhan Hill with his left hand. Sadrita Shangato Maghar Grihi Savyena Panina. Quote, with his left hand he picked up that mountain which was touching the clouds. End quote. According to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, when Lord Krishna was preparing to lift Govardhan Hill, a partial expansion of his Yogamaya potency named Samhariki temporarily removed all the rain from the sky so that he could as he ran very swiftly from the porch of his house to the mountain, neither his turban nor other garments became wet. Text 20. The Lord then addressed the cowherd community. O mother, O father, O residents of Vraja, if you wish, you may now come under this hill with your cows. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur provides the following insight in this regard. Ordinarily, a large cowherd community, which includes many thousands of cows, calves, bulls, and so on, could not fit under the base of a medium-sized hill like Sri Govardhan. However, because the hill was in ecstasy, being touched by the hand of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it acquired inconceivable power and even felt the hundreds of deadly thunderbolts thrown upon its back by angry Indra to be offerings of soft, fragrant flowers. At times, Sri Govardhan was not even aware that the thunderbolts were striking. From the Harivamsa, the Acharya has also quoted Sri Krishna himself as saying, Trilokyam api utsahate rakshitum kim punar rajam. Quote, Sri Govardhan can give shelter to all the three worlds. What to speak of the simple land of Vraja, end quote. When Indra's attack began and Krishna lifted up the hill, the deer, the wild hogs, and other animals and birds standing on the hill's flanks climbed up to its peaks, and even they did not experience the slightest distress. Text 21. You should have no fear that this mountain will fall from my hand. Don't be afraid of the wind and rain, for your deliverance from these afflictions has already been arranged. Text 21 or 22. Their minds thus pacified by Lord Krishna, they all entered beneath the hill, where they found ample room for themselves and all their cows, wagons, servants, and priests, and for all other members of the community as well. Purport. All the domestic animals of Vrindavan were brought beneath Govardhan Hill for shelter. Text 23. Lord Krishna, forgetting hunger and thirst and putting aside all considerations of personal pleasure, stood there holding up the hill for 7 days, as the people of Vraja gazed upon him. Purport. According to the Vishnu Purana, Vrajeka Vasibir Harsha Vismita Kshar Nirikshita Gopa Gopi Janar Rishtai Priti Vishparite Ksana Samstuyamana Charita Krishna Shailam Adharayat. Quote, Lord Krishna held up the mountain while his praises were chanted by the residents of Vraja, all of whom had now now had the opportunity to dwell together with him, and who glanced at him with joyful and amazed eyes. Thus the cowherd men and women were all elated, and out of a loving affection they opened their eyes wide. End quote. By continuously drinking the nectar of the beauty and sweetness of Sri Krishna, the residents of Vrindavan felt no hunger, thirst, or fatigue, and Lord Krishna, by seeing their beautiful forms, also forgot about eating, drinking, and sleeping. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that 7 days of continuous rain from the Samvartika clouds failed to flood the district of Mathura because the Supreme Lord, simply by his potency, immediately dried up the water as it fell to the ground. Thus, Krishna's lifting of Govardhan Hill is full of fascinating details and has for thousands of years remained one of his most famous pastimes. Text 24. When Indra observed this exhibition of Lord Krishna's mystic power, he became most astonished. Pulled down from his platform of false pride and his intentions thwarted, he ordered his clouds to desist. Text 25. Seeing that the fierce wind and rain had now ceased, the sky had become clear of rain clouds, and the sun had risen, Lord Krishna, the lifter of Govardhan Hill, spoke to the cowherd community as follows. Text 26. Lord Krishna said, "My dear cowherd men, please go out with your wives, children, and possessions. Give up your fear. The rain and wind have stopped, and the river's high waters have subsided." Text 27. After collecting their respective cows and loading their paraphernalia onto their wagons, the cowherd men went out. The women, children,
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha, Shyama Sundar, Lalita Vishaka, Radha Shyama Sundar, Lalita Vishaka, Radha Shyama Sundar, Lalita Vishaka, Radha Shyama Sundar, Lalita Vishaka. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe. Nama Sundara, Jaya Radhe, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Jai. Jaya Jaya Gurudev, 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 Jaya Gurudev.
Okay, man. Hare Krishna, sweet notice. Thank all of you for everything. See you later. Hari Hari Bo.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
Gurudev,
Krishna, Hare
Dandavat
Gurudev.
Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
Lala Pranam,
Hare
Hari
Krishna,
Bol.
Shri Gurudev, Dandavat
Hare
Pranam.
Krishna,
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. It's from Ghana. Hare Krishna.
so beautiful.
Sweet. Have a wonderful day and see you later.
Gurudev.